Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Shaban Naum. I am the head of business and strategy at HP Security. Today, we're going to discuss zero trust. With me, I have Ian Pratt. If you can introduce yourself, Ian.
Hi, I'm Ian Pratt. You've joined HP as a result of the Bromium acquisition. I'm head of security for commercial systems at HP.
So, Ian, you and I have worked together for what now, 15 years, and we've had a background in virtualization and security, and we've been looking at how to solve a lot of the various challenges of the user space and enterprise needs. You know, there's a hot topic today around zero trust. Could you help me maybe understand, in your opinion, what does zero trust actually mean to you?
Yeah, it's a term which is, it means a lot of different things to different people. But if you go back to its roots and really look at what it grew out of, some work which really started as way back as 2004 in something called the Jericho Forum, where they really observed that what was happening was something they called deperimeterization, where the whole concept of having an enterprise network where you could draw a perimeter around it and make this assumption that everything outside was bad, but once you were inside the enterprise network, then you were in the secure environment. And they realized that there were a lot of pressures that were from all sorts of different trends, which were really causing that concept to break down. Obviously, you started having concepts like cloud emerge and people making use of software as a service for business critical functions. You also had people working remotely, wanting to work from home, as in the current time where we're obviously seeing an enormous amount of working from home, but working from coffee shops, etc. This whole concept of having a rigid perimeter, trying to keep the bad things out, but having, once things get inside, then trusting them really starts to break down. And this concept of zero trust really emerged to look at how you cope with that, how you can apply some sound principles, engineering principles, to try and improve the situation, making use of the principle of least privilege and to try and segment and isolate resources. And certainly what it means to me, and I think this definition is increasingly becoming accepted, is this idea of not trusting a system depending on which network it's on, but really looking at individual resources that you want to allow machines or users to have access to, and then providing the access to control to that on a fine-grained basis. So before allowing someone to have access to a given network service or a given website, what machine are they connecting from? Let's robustly identify that machine that they're connecting from. Who is the user that is making that connection, and then making the decision on that fine-grained basis, and then allowing them to have just access to those resources rather than necessarily any other resource. You can evaluate that decision for other resources they're connecting to, perhaps require additional checks, such as the security posture of the machine, before allowing that connection through to a more sensitive resource. And that sort of whole approach, I think, is now being adopted as this term of zero trust. And that might mean, some organizations, for example, are looking at, rather than having their desktops sitting on a special enterprise network, why should that be any different from a network when someone's at home or working in Starbucks in terms of the way that it's treated? So, deprivileging that network, making those machines and the users identify themselves when they're trying to connect to resources, but not treat them specially just because they happen to be on the network, because on that enterprise network in the office, because perhaps someone else has plugged some different machine into that network that you don't really know anything about. And that's where I guess the concept has become popularized in the last few years about the moves that Google and other companies have been making in terms of removing being anything special about the office, the network running through the office that those machines, those endpoints are connected to.
Right. So, in light of the environment we're in today with everyone working remotely, some of the things I'm seeing in the conversations I'm having now with enterprise CISOs and CIOs, there was this phased approach, where the first phase was get everybody a new device, get the network up and running, and get everyone a VPN client. And it seems like the second phase now is around, how do we protect our enterprise against these potential threats sitting on devices that are not necessarily behind a corporate firewall. Really, it's around extending their capabilities of audit and control and security. How does zero trust apply to that in terms of call it a modern architecture?
Yeah, well, again, you have to go, it's all about making things more fine-grained, looking at exactly what it is the user or is trying to achieve, what service they're trying to access. So, a simple way of using a VPN is just to connect the machine back in to the corporate network, and give them the same kind of access they would have had as if they were sitting on that corporate office network. But a better approach is to actually look at how you decide whether to provide access to those resources on a per resource basis. So that's when you start looking at which user is it that's connecting, which device are they connecting from, and then making those access control decisions. And you can really, in a more advanced version of zero trust, really look at how it starts extending into the endpoint itself, because we all know that you could end up with malware running on an endpoint, and you don't necessarily you don't necessarily trust the endpoint, but you can actually start segmenting things on an application basis, and one way of doing that is using virtualization, using the capabilities which are built into the machine to be able to to run multiple virtual machines. Now, all CPUs have had that capability for a number of years, and actually use these virtual machines in the background for running different applications, and hence limiting what effect any malware that ends up running within that virtual machine can have on the rest of the system. So, for example, you can set a system up such that for every Word document you open, you create a new virtual machine in the background to render that Word document. If that document turns out to be malicious, it's going to be contained within that virtual machine. That virtual machine may have access to the internet, but there's no reason why it should have access to your intranet. So again, on the a sort of per application basis, you can do that fine-grained control over what that is going to have access to.
So that's your least privilege down to the application, the individual tasks, and the network controls in terms of segmentation.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really using the hardware capabilities which these modern CPUs have, these modern devices have, making use of features such as HP short click to enable these virtual machines to come in and out of existence in a way that is transparent to the user, but really limiting in a very robust way, using that virtualization capability to provide strong isolation such that we know precisely what this given application running in this environment is allowed to do.
Yeah, but look at enterprise today. They're confronted with the on two fronts, right? The ability to absolutely understand situationally what is happening to that device, and that device is not inside the corporate firewall. And they also have to solve for the fact that the user shouldn't be the final cyber decision maker, right? And so look at hardware and platform security, and I look at zero trust. How is that being used by enterprises today?
Yeah, well, I think that's the challenge with all of these devices out of the office. A lot of visibility is being lost into what's happening on those devices, at least for many organizations. It doesn't need to be that way. You can have always on VPNs, which actually allow even sort of legacy management agents to be able to connect back into the enterprise to provide that visibility. But fundamentally, for the security of these systems, the reliance today is obviously on detection, on being able to to have security products which have some notion of what is bad, to look for it, and then to try and block it. And I think particularly at the at the current time, it's just hard to rely on that. It's there are it's these the bad guys are very good at bypassing these kind of approaches. There's also the question as to whether these devices are being updated in the same way that they were before when they were on the corporate network. They're perhaps more vulnerable as a result. And
well, I want to stop you there, Ian, because that's an interesting topic. So in terms of patching and maintaining those devices, if they're not connected to the VPN, how are those devices being protected?
Well, I think that's an interesting question for for organizations which have perhaps adopted a more modern approach to to the updating of devices. Those devices are pulling updates from Microsoft Update, at least for for those apps. Then that will be happening in automatic fashion. For other organizations that were using a more traditional approach of testing patches and then pushing them out to a WSUS server, it's been tough for them. You really do want, if you're still following that approach, which is a perfectly valid approach, but you can only really do that with folks working from home if you've got an always-on VPN, so that you still can talk to that device at all times. And a lot of organizations have been struggling with that because they didn't necessarily have the VPN capacity or the internet capacity to do that. And one of the things which we've seen is organizations moving to a split tunnel approach, where when folks are browsing the internet, that network traffic is going out directly over their home network and out to the internet, but this split tunnel VPN is always connecting them into the corporate environment, so that the IT team have that visibility into what's happening on that device. And that's for many IT departments or CISOs, sort of split tunnel VPNs were an anathema. But it's a reality that people have had to get used to, because they didn't want to back all of that traffic into the corporate network and back out again. And also, quite frankly, many organizations didn't require the user to bring the VPN up anyways. So that sort of traffic was happening anyway. And right. I think what it all points to is, the endpoints have to look after themselves. You can't be totally reliant on filtering happening in the enterprise network or only in the enterprise internet connection. You really want those devices to be able to defend themselves, and whether that's using a combination of security products, trying to spot what is bad, and blacklisting, etc., and just the isolation of the dangerous, the risky activities, like opening email attachments, web downloads, those kind of actions, isolating them within virtual machines, such that if anything bad does happen, it's going to be contained within that virtual machine. You bring those techniques together, and you've got a much better chance of keeping that endpoint free of malware.
So you've referenced the legacy approach, and we're talking about zero trust here, and we're talking about a modern architecture around zero trust or endpoint architecture. I think it's very helpful to understand that your thoughts on when you build product and you build IT products to support the business operations. It seems to me that what we've done is we found ourselves in a position where we're constantly having to bolt on new capabilities to solve for a point problem to support the legacy challenge, as opposed to having security designed in, right? So if I look at a solid base of trust, to help me understand, have you seen customers applying zero trust to help them in their business needs, to help them to secure and provide that robust least privilege down at the endpoint?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It is an approach which is being adopted by perhaps the more forward-leaning enterprises at the moment. But obviously making use of the features that are built into the platform to be able to have robust identity of machines using the trusted platform module, having that root of trust is key. Knowing that you're talking to this particular machine is a key part of establishing that identity of the machine that you need for a zero trust architecture. And then obviously you want to identify the user. Obviously, there may be various multi-factor approaches being used for doing that as well, whether that's biometric or with an authenticator application, using a second device. Being able to take that information plus other information perhaps about the security posture of the machine, when it was last patched, or what its boot measurements were, and then making a decision whether you're going to allow that combination of inputs, whether you're going to allow the user to access this particular application, and making that decision on a very fine-grained basis. That sort of approach is clearly going to give you a far more robust environment where you're not just allowing someone into the environment, onto the enterprise network, and then giving them free rein. You're keeping things on a least privileged basis.
All right. Well, in terms of final thoughts, any insight in terms of where you think enterprises ought to be going in applying zero trust architectures as they go through these phases of supporting their users and adding audit controls and preventing home print of content that they shouldn't be doing, and copying, pasting? Like, what would you recommend right now in light of zero trust and where we are today? What are your final thoughts?
Well, I think as folks start going back into the office, perhaps organizations should be thinking about applying more of the zero trust approach to their internal networks, because the chances are there's going to be some number of machines which have been out of the office, where bad things will have happened to them while they've been out of the office, and people are going to carry them back in. And if those machines then get free reign across the office networks, that's going to be a challenge.
Right.
Also, of course, there are an awful lot of machines sitting in offices which have just been turned off for the last 3 months. Really want to make sure that those machines are patched up to date before someone logs in and then fires up a web browser or starts clicking on email attachments that are containing Word documents that have just arrived.
And don't forget the admins are remote too now.
Yeah. Well, that's a particular challenge. That's there's going to be fun times ahead for IT departments and CISO departments managing that back to work, knowing that they've got to get everything into a clean state, and know that there are going to be machines arriving which are bound to have problems.
Well, Ian, this has been great. I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it. And let's hope that as we work through the next few months and years, we'll be able to see more enterprises apply zero trust endpoint architecture as part of their tool set. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.